Welcome. We are in Senior AP English. We're in Senior English A, and our objective for the hour is to talk about Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and more particularly today we're going to focus on the Pardoner's Prologue and Tale. Now, before we get started, for your notes, I want you to jot down what we often will refer to as the dramatic quality of these stories. Now, what do I mean by the dramatic quality? I don't mean 8th grade drama. That's not what I'm talking about. Although, there's going to be a little of that involved in this, no doubt. But what I mean is the following. You have to understand that this whole project is being designed by Chaucer for you to imagine, in almost like a play or a movie, what it is that happens. They're going as a group, an entourage is the French word. They're going as a group, an entourage, down the road towards Canterbury. They're going to pull over to the side of the road, and then one of them is going to stand up and say, "Hi, I am so-and-so. Let me introduce myself." Now, you might ask the question, dude, if they all show up at the hotel ready to go to Canterbury together, you would assume they all know each other and therefore they don't have to introduce each other. So you can kind of already see one of the flaws in Chaucer's plan, if you want to call it a flaw. It's actually a brilliant setup for Chaucer, and here's why. The pardoner's going to stand up in front of the whole group. Now, the reason that you read the general prologue is so you know who that group is. Remember? You've got that friar there. Remember, we talked about him, the wanton one and all of that. You've got, remember, that good parson there, that first he wrought and afterwards he taught, he practiced. We got that guy. We've got we got the nun who was there, the prioress who was by no means undergrown. We've got the wife of Bath there. We've got all of these people that have been, we got the cook there, right? We got the captain of the boat. We got the lawyer there. We got all those guys that you've made lists of. You're not going to pass my exam if you haven't done that part. Make a note to yourself. If you don't know who the characters of the general prologue are, you're not going to pass my exam. So you've got to make that list in those three categories, as I said. Remember, some of them are religious, some of them are upper class, some of them are working class. If you make that list and you put them in those three categories, it's a mnemonic to begin to remember who all those people are. But all those people are sitting there, right? When the partner stands up and says, "Let me tell you a little bit about myself," and he goes on for a while, and then he will tell his story. So there's two parts. It's like a two-part dance to each one of these. Part one, the introduction of the character. Dude, we've already been introduced to the character. Yeah, that was by Chaucer. Chaucer tells us about the partner that he hangs out with what pal? Do you remember? I'll give you a hint. His pal was the guy who has the huge acne whiteheads all over his face, and that he tries all kinds of stuff, including garlic, and it doesn't work. And he's lecherous. You remember who that guy was? The Chaucer hangs out with the Sumner. He's a spiritual bounty hunter. He goes out and he finds people and brings them in and makes them pay money to the partner. They are together, birds from Charing Cross of the same feather. They're pals. They work together. So while the partner's standing up talking, where's the Sumner? Sumner's sitting right there. And the partner will say, "Let me tell you about myself." He's drinking. And as he drinks, his tongue gets looser. So that by the end of this little prologue of him, he's going to say things that he clearly wouldn't be saying at the beginning of his little talk. And you can imagine the Sumner sitting there going, "Dude, would you just shut up? What are you telling everybody for?" That kind of thing. Do you got me? So that's what we mean by the dramatic quality. Let me give you another example. The wife of Bath is going to stand up and she's going to say, "Listen, women want it as bad as men. Sex. Women want it as bad as men. All of us women know that. Hello? What women are in this entourage other than the wife of Bath?" Yeah, we're told there are only other women there are nuns, and they're good nuns, which is to say they're celibate. So you can imagine, again, the dramatic quality. When the wife of Bath says, who by the way has been married 5 times and ready for her 6th time, the reason why she has to find a 6th husband is all 5 of her other husbands dead. But she says, I can tell you about marriage, it completely sucks. It's a misery and a woe. It's the very first thing she says. And then she turns around and says, I'm waiting for my sixth husband whenever he appears. And the reason is simple. We can't, she says, we women, we can't not have a man because we need a man because we like sex so much. And all of us women know that. She kind of does her hand like this. You can imagine those poor nuns kind of going, oh, good heavens, what is she just, right? Because those are nuns who do not sleep with men. All right? The dramatic quality of the text. That's the point I'm making here. So as we turn to the partner's prologue, and that's what it's called, coming before the tale, the prologue is the little introduction. Key, put it in your notes. There's always a connection or a relationship or a contiguity between the prologue and the actual story or the tale. Does that make sense, Mr. Brown? So there's going to be some things that the partner's going to say in his prologue that will fit into the story itself. Now, I'm going to spend the majority of my time with the partner's prologue, not the tale. I'm going to assume you've already read both the prologue and the tale, and the story itself will outline briefly at the end of our lecture, but the primary thing we're interested in is what he says right now. Notice what he says. By the way, this ain't all of what he says. Your textbook company has decided to delete, how does one say it politely, some of the more coarse components of what this partner has to say. Now remember, this partner is supposed to be a man of the church. He's a preacher. He is supposed to be celibate, and he's supposed to be honest, right? So let's take a look at what he has to say. My lords, he said. Chaucer's like a CNN journalist just sitting there supposedly writing all this down. That is to say, dude, I went on this trip and this guy stood up, he started talking. All I did was just like a stenographer, an amanuensis, a secretary. I just wrote it all down. This is what he said. Genius of Chaucer, of course. He's going to invent a preacher who's not completely honest. Can we just say it at that point? All right, let's take a look at some of the irony of this. My lords, he said, in churches where I preach, I cultivate a haughty kind of speech and ring it out as loudly as a bell. I've got it all by heart, the tale I tell. I have a text that always is the same. It always has been since I learned look what he calls preaching. He calls it what? See, and some of you are writing this down because these are going to be the concrete examples you're going to quote in your paper on irony. What does he call preaching? He calls it a game. It's a total game. He loves one verse out of the entire Bible. He mentions it in Latin. The translation is, the love of money is the root of all evil. He says, I love to preach from that one verse. And he says, here's why. When I preach from that one verse, it frees the pelf. Now we're back to Giudice's interest in people of England of 1350. One of the things Mr. Giudice will learn only from Chaucer is this. They don't have banks. The only currency is coinage. They have to carry that coinage with them on their body, or they'll leave it at home inside of a safe called a coffer. That coffer will only have one key, and the guy who owns it usually wears it on a string around his neck. That's the only way he can protect his money. When he goes in public with his coinage, he doesn't like to put it on his belt in a little bag because it could easily be torn off and stolen. So what they did, apparently, is they would take a long piece of cloth. They would open it up, and you would lay your money coinage right down the center. Then you would fold it, fold it, fold it, fold it, pick it up, and it was your belt that held up your pants. You put it around your body, and you tied it off. It was called your pelf. Okay? So if you bought something, you literally had to undo your belt. It was a way to secure your money. This partner says, I love to preach from the one verse, the love of money is the root of all evil, because I can make people feel guilty, and then it frees their pelf. Meaning what? He preaches for what one reason? Ironically, he preaches so he can make bank. He loves to be able to get their money. Let's take a look at this, and Mr. Giudice and some of us will go, geez, really? Let's take a look. I preach as you have heard me say before, and tell 100 lying mockeries more. He goes, whoa, I love to preach because you can get up there and just lie. It's awesome. And tell 100 lying mockeries more. I take great pains in stretching out my neck to east and west. I crane about and peck just like a pigeon sitting on a barn. My hands and tongues together spin the yarn, and all my antics are a joy to see. The curse of avarice, that is to say greed, and cupidity, it's another word for greed, right, is all my sermon. Why? Look at it. There it is. For it frees the pelf. Out come the pence. What are pence? Money. Yeah, money, right, coinage. Out come the pence. And specially for myself, look at what this guy says. For my exclusive purpose is to win, and not at all to castigate their sin. Once dead, what matter how their souls may fare? They can go blackberrying for all I care. Whoa, 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 what did you just read? Here's a Catholic priest who says what? The only reason I preach is to get what? Rich. Is to get money. What? And then he goes, what? You think I should care about their souls? Once they're dead, they can go to hell and go blackberry picking for all I care. Whoa. Whoa, whoa. Notice the ellipsis. Do you see this 2 times already that your textbook company has provided those little ellipses? The reason for that ... the reason for that is because he says other things that your textbook company just can't put into the book here, okay? Because this guy starts to go on. I mean, he's drinking a little beer. We're going to know that because he says it of himself here in a second. He's drinking a little beer, and as he drinks, his tongue gets a little bit looser, and then he starts telling us what he really thinks about being a church man. Let's keep going. And thus, look at the irony. I preach against the very vice I make my living out of, avarice. And yet, however guilty of that sin myself, with others I have power to win them from it. I can bring them to repent, but that is not my principal intent. Covetousness is both the root and stuff of all I preach. That ought to be enough. Covetousness means what, Mr. Keeley? If I covet, I what? You want. I desire what other people got. Ironically, let's put it in your notes because this is a really good example for the paper that you're writing. Ironically, he loves to preach against greed and avarice, covetousness. But Mr. Judice, he says the only reason he preaches against greed is because he himself is what? He's greedy. He wants their money. So he can preach against greed, make them feel guilty, and then they'll give him money. Yes. Well then, he says, I give examples thick and fast. I'm on page 168 now. I give examples thick and fast from bygone times, old stories from the past. A yokel mind loves stories from of old, being the kind it can repeat and hold. Now the word yokel is an important word. The word yokel means a really stupid person. Who does he say is a yokel? Who are yokels in his little story here? He says, I love to tell stories because the stupid yokels, they love these stories.
Basically the people that come to him.
Oh, yeah. Who would that, what would that be?
Church audience.
Yes, the church audience. That is to say, the people who come every day to church. Now wait a minute. We got to ask a really important question at this point. Who is Chaucer writing this for? See, now think about this for a moment, because you're going to write this down. See, we're helping you to be able to write your paper. Who is Chaucer writing this for? See, that's interesting. Mr. Durant says, well, think about it. It's possible that Chaucer could be writing to the church people themselves who are hypocrites, basically saying to them, shame on you, this is bad, bad. He could, no doubt. And a number of churchmen and women will read this, no doubt. And they will say, yeah, this is not good. This is bad. But Mr. Durant points out, wait a minute. It's kind of like this. Imagine for a moment if somebody were to take a hidden camera and go into a person's office that you really respect. Let's say some kind of religious person. And that religious person starts talking about you as being a complete fool who will believe anything. And then you get to watch that video. Wait a minute, we're familiar with undercover journalism, aren't we? They do this all the time, don't they? They walk in with a camera, hidden camera. They show you something about people, and then you get to watch it. How do you feel about them after the fact? Do you trust them the same way? Ah. Who is Chaucer writing this for? Mr. Durant is absolutely right. That's why it's written in what language? Ah. If you want to educate the yokels, the way you do it is to show a bad preacher. The next time they go to church, and the preacher stands up and says, hey, you guys all need to give me your money. Anyone that's familiar with this story will say, what? Whoa, wait a minute. You could be trying to screw me out of some money, and this has nothing to do with God. How dare you say that to me? No, I know, I'm familiar. I read Chaucer's prologue to the partner. This is a partner, a preacher, standing up and saying, I don't care about their souls once they go to hell. They can blackberry pick for all I care. I want their, well, let's watch how he finishes. Well, then I give examples thick and fast from bygone times, old stories from the past. A yokel mind loves stories from of old, being the kind that can repeat in whole. What? You can imagine somebody, maybe the parson, the good parson, is going to speak up here and go, whoa, you can't do, notice him. What? Do you think as long as I can preach and get their silver for the things I teach that I'll live in poverty from choice? That's not the counsel of my inner voice. No, let me preach and beg from church to church and never do an honest job of work. No, nor make baskets like St. Paul to gain a livelihood. I do not preach in vain. There's no apostle I would counterfeit. I mean to have money, wool, and cheese and wheat, though it were given me by the poorest lad or poorest village widow, though she had a string of starving children all agape. No, let me drink the liquor of the grape and keep a jolly wench in every town. Whoa. Whoa. What did the preacher man just say? He goes, yeah, my job is to get their money, and I love to come to new towns where I can find the local bar and a good-looking girl to go with the local bar, a wench. Yes, that's what I want! Exclamation mark. You can imagine, it's at this point, one or two of the entourage, a few of the other religious, maybe? You can imagine the Sumner at this point. He's a crook along with this guy. But what would the Sumner be doing to the partner right about now? He'd be looking at him, giving him this signal, right? Dude, we're making bank here off these people, and now you're like telling them what we're doing. Once you say it out loud, it kind of jacks the program a little bit. Shut up, dude. Why is the partner going on? Well, take a look. But listen, gentlemen. To bring things down to a conclusion, would you like a tale? Story? That's the whole point they pulled over to the side of the road, remember? Before you ever get the story, you always get the prologue. The prologue tells us something about the character that will inform the story. Look what he says. But listen, gentlemen, to bring things down to a conclusion, would you like a tale? Now, as I've drunk a draught of corn rye ale, I've been drinking. No, duh. That's why he's been able to kind of probably loosen his tongue this way. By God, it stands to reason I can strike on some good story that you all will like. Look at these next lines. For though I am a wholly vicious man, vicious, good or bad? Really bad. For though I am a wholly vicious man, don't think I can't tell moral tales. I can. Whoa, what did you just read? Now, Chaucer's going to raise a really intriguing question, and it's one I always love to pause now and to ask you, and it's this. I'll ask it several different ways. Do you, in your mind, believe that you can separate message from messenger? Or for you, are they exactly the same? Symbiotic. And a messenger and a message are all the same. Okay, Mr. McGee, I heard that question you just asked me, but I'm not totally sure I completely comprehend what you're asking me. All right, I'll ask it in a word picture. You guys know I like word pictures. How about this one? The father says to the son, you shouldn't smoke. What's the message? Don't smoke. Who's the messenger?
The guy who's smoking.
Now my question is this. In your mind, do you separate message from messenger? In other words, you have the message, don't smoke. You have the messenger, who is smoking. But you want to be able to separate those two and just hear the message, don't smoke. Or are you more inclined to say, dude, if the guy saying don't smoke is smoking, the message is no good? What do you think?
Hypocritical.
Hypocritical. And therefore the message is no good? But isn't it true that you shouldn't smoke? For your health, right? I mean, we all know what that does to lungs, right? We're familiar. I mean, it's not like it's we're not in the 1950s anymore. Everybody's seen the pictures. We all know what it does. You'll die 25 to 30 years earlier if you smoke. I mean, everybody knows that. So, to what degree can you separate message from messenger?
You can take it like not necessarily just put it in the back of your mind like maybe I shouldn't smoke, but not necessarily base your decision around.
What about the guy smoking? Does that damage the message for you?
Yeah, pretty much.
A bit.
A lot.
A lot. Second question for Chaucer. See, some of you will say, whoa, 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 that really disturbs me once I start thinking about it, because once I'm a parent, and that'll happen statistically for a number of you, once I'm a parent, the question becomes, what will I tell my kids not to do if they then turn around and go, dude, when you were like a senior in high school, Frank laughs. Oh no. Right?
Go to bed.
So now what do you do when you get asked that question? You say, do you lie? No, I never did that. No, I would have never done. Do you lie? Of course, your kid will have a tendency to go, really? Now you're lying. Or do you say, yeah, I did it, but I'm telling you not to do it? Does that work? See, Ramos goes, no, I don't think so. Well, now wait a minute. It begs a really difficult question then. Who can be a messenger if you can't separate message from messenger? Who can be a messenger then to a kid? Because obviously a bright kid's going to ask, dude, didn't you do? One or two of us sitting in this room have felt it was okay to do certain kinds of things because adult figures in our life who told us not to do it had to admit, yeah, I did it. And the minute that you heard that, you were like, well, dude, don't tell me not to do it then. And yet, ironically, here in 20 years, you could turn around and find yourself doing the exact same thing. Why? Because you really don't want someone you're responsible for doing something stupid. So you're going to say, don't do it. Which will then beg the question, did you do it? Are you going to lie? Are you going to tell them the truth? Way to go, Chaucer. That's a really intriguing question. If I had thought about that when I was a freshman, I might have done one or two things differently through high school. Oh well, we were dumb and young. Let's ask a second question. This one's also kind of intriguing. The second question goes something like this. Chaucer is going to take a very important person, a religious person, a priest, a pardoner, and he's going to show us the bad side, the negative side. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing to do? For example, what if there was somebody you knew who was really, really popular and famous for being a good person, and you discovered something about him or her that nobody else knew that was really bad? Do you tell? Do you expose that person or no? Especially because you know that person is believed in by lots of people. 3A. Let's jump to the classic example of it. You'll remember the little classic American ditty called The Scarlet Letter. The novel opens with a woman standing on scaffolding with an A on her chest holding an infant. The A stands for adultery. She slept with a man who was not her husband. She became pregnant. She had a child. The small community, very conservative, has brought her to the front of their community in the very center, standing on a scaffolding. And the one question asked, demanded of her is, who is the dad? We want to punish him too. She says, I ain't telling. No, you will tell. She says, no, I'm not telling. One man is asking her again and again, you must tell. It's the preacher of the town. Reverend Dimsdale says, you got to tell. She says, I've got nothing. He says, you must tell. For the good of your soul, your child's soul, this community, you must tell. She says, I ain't telling. We find out through the course of the novel that the daddy of the child is the preacher. Dimsdale, the very guy who's standing right there in front of the whole crowd saying, you got to tell. He's the dad. He knows it too. He's the dad. He won't tell the community. He won't confess. For this reason. He says, I'm the preacher of the town. People look at me as a man of God. If they were to find out that I made a major screw up, like sleeping with a pretty girl and then having a child, they might lose their faith in God and go to hell. I don't want to be responsible for that. I'm not going to tell. Question: do you expose a very respected institution? See, there are people who will claim of Chaucer, bad what you're doing here. Because what you're doing is you're calling into question the sanctimony, the respectfulness of the church, of religion. Yokels, for example, who hear this might go, oh, this is what church people are like? Dude, I ain't doing that church thing anymore. And they stop believing in God or whatever. And lots of contemporaries of Chaucer said, this isn't good. You're damaging potentially people's faith because you're showing church as being someplace where there are hypocrites. It leads to skepticism by the yokels. What is skepticism? Do you know that word? What is skepticism? An inability to really believe, right? To begin to have doubts. Question: do you tell on somebody who's very respected in our community? Of course, this became the question of the 20th century, the late 20th century, didn't it? In regards to religious groups. Where, for example, you have a very respected priest, come to find out he molested children. Question: do you expose him? And in the process of exposing him, you could raise the whole question of, really? This is what the church is about? Dude, I ain't believing in it anymore. I'm not believing in any of that. A number of people said, I never told. Because like Dimsdale in the Scarlet Letter, I didn't want to turn people into skeptics. What about if it was the President of the United States, an institution, of course, that's so precious to us? Do you tell if you know something about a high-ranking official? And then people, of course, will maybe begin to doubt in the legitimacy of the institution. Do you tell or do you not tell?
Tell.
Chaucer says what?
Tell.
You tell. By the way, so did Hawthorne at the conclusion of Scarlet Letter. He says it in a famous afterword. Be true, be true, be true, he says. Always tell. So notice we've used this text to raise two questions already. One, can you separate message from messenger? And two, is Chaucer doing a good thing or a bad thing by exposing the hypocrisy of the church? Of course, the church came to him and said, who is this? We need to know who this partner is so we can get rid of him. And Chaucer went, I'm right, we met him. We met him at that hotel, and we did this trip, and that was a long time ago. I can't remember now. See how that works? And he has the ability to then kind of step back and go, yeah, it wasn't me anyway. It was, right? Although, church officials asking for this partner themselves could be very aware of any number of church officials who were just like this guy. Some of them might be just like this guy. You see how that works, right? Which is to say they want to shut him up. Got me? Now let's get to the story itself. The partner's tale is a fascinating story, but for your notes, he did not invent this story. It's a really old story, right? The story goes something like this. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Keeley, observation.
Basically, he's insulting
He who?
the partner.
I got it.
He's insulting the people he's with because he said yokels like old stories.
Yeah, and look, there they are. In fact, I'll do you one better. When we get to the end of his story, he'll come right back to insult them some more. Keeley is dead on right. In other words, he's been drinking, and while he's drinking, he literally is going to insult the very people. You people, you're a bunch of idiots. And let me tell you a story, because that's what you idiots like. Or story. Absolutely right. That's right. He's insulting the very... Of course, he's doing it. Why? He's a little tipsy, right? He's been drinking. So our story runs something like this. You got three brothers. They're hanging out at a bar. They're drunk. Some guy comes by ringing a bell, because that's what they do when they have bunches of dead bodies. They put them on a cart. For those of you who are Monty Python fans, this is Bring Out Your Dead scene, okay? And he rings the bell. He rings the bell, right? And one of the brothers wants to know what's going on. Somebody says, oh, death is all around. It's terrible. Death? We're going to go find death and kill it. And in their drunken riot, we're told, they get up, they run down the road looking for death. They run across this old man. And they say, have you seen death? And he's like, well, yeah, down the street there. I think I saw him just a second ago. Boys come running around the corner. There ain't no death, but there's a huge mound of gold sitting in the middle of the road. They're like, sweet, we got bank. The only problem is, how are we going to get it back home? Because they're going to say that we're robbers. So this is what they decide to do. They decide to send the youngest back to town to get some drink and food. And then the three of them are going to put this thing together in bags and are going to carry it home. When as soon as the young kid leaves, the other two go, you know what? Gold splits better between two than between three. When our youngest brother comes back, let's jack the ever-living snot out of him. We'll divide this gold by two. The young kid on his way to town says, gold splits better with one than with three. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to pour poison in the water bottles of my two bros, and then when they drink, they're going to get killed, and then I'll have all the gold to myself. Sure enough, when he comes back, the two jump on the youngest brother and immediately kill him. He falls right onto the top of the gold. The other two say, geez, that was hard work. Let's have a drink. They both drink from the poison. They also fall down. So all three of them now are laying on top of the pile of gold. Guess what? They all found what they were looking for. They all found death. Of course, why did they all three die? Because they wanted gold. And of course, our word here is greed or avarice or cupidity. This is the story. Oh, cursed sin. I'm on 175. This is the end, and we're going to come back to Keely's brilliant observation. Oh, by the way, his drunken buzz is now off, and he's in full preacher's mode. He's doing it now. He's completely forgotten that just a few minutes ago, he told these guys already. Remember, he called it a game. Oh, cursed sin, oh, blackguardly excess, oh, treacherous homicide, oh, wickedness, oh, gluttony that lasted on and diced. I'm on 175, line 300. Dearly beloved, God forgive your sin and keep you from the vice of avarice. My holy pardon frees you all of this, provided that you make the right approaches. That is with sterling rings or silver brooches. Bow down your heads upon this holy bull. So you're right, Keely. He turns and he goes, let's finish this little lesson up by saying you people are a bunch of sinners. Go to the little next line. One thing I've mentioned in my tale. Dear people, I have some relics in my bale. A bale is a sack, top of page 176. And pardons, too, as full and fine, I hope, as any in England given me by the Pope. Now, he's already told us that he makes all this up about pardons from the Pope, right? Only now he says, you guys are so fortunate to have me along. Look what he says. He's going to actually request of them that they pay him money for his services. Look at this. If there be one among you that is willing to have my absolution for a shilling devoutly given, come and do not harden your hearts, but kneel in humbleness for pardon. Or else receive my pardon as we go. Big Mac pardon, Big Mac religion, right? We can do drive-through as well if you'd like, right? You can renew it in every town, and so always provided that you still renew each time and in good money what is due. It is an honor to have for you to have found who can absolve you as you ply the spur in any accident that might occur. In other words, some of us are on horses. You know, you could fall off, break your neck, and I would be here to give you last rites. You're in luck. I'm here, he says, right? For instance, we're all at fortune's beck. Your horse may throw you down and break your neck. What a security it is to all to have me here among you, and a call with pardon for the lowly and the great, when soul leaves body for the future state. And I advise our host here to begin, the most enveloped of you all in sin. Come forward, host. You shall be first to pay, and kiss my holy relics right away. Only a grout. Come on. Unbuckle your purse. Now, that's not funny until you know that the host, of course, is the host of the bell, the tabard next to the bell, which is, of course, the what? Right, it's the whorehouse. That is to say, the reason that he says you're the most enveloped in sin is because the host is the pimp that runs the whorehouse, right? Notice your textbook ends here with an exclamation mark. This ain't the end of the prologue. Okay, they just had to edit out what happens next. What happens next is that the host goes, like, you know what? I'm going to come up and, are you kidding me? The host insults the partner and says, here in a second, you'll pull down your breeches and have me kissing your underwear too, telling me that's been blessed by the Pope. To which immediately the partner then gets mad. Like, he can't, how dare you talk like that to a man of the cloth, a man of the church. And they get ready to fight. The host and the partner are going to actually duke it out. The knight, we're told. The knight, remember a knight is along? The knight steps up and says, whoa, 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 boys, we're trying to have a little fun here. You guys you tone it down, tone it down. The knight is the great unifier, if you will. He makes them both shake hands. And then Chaucer says, we were back on the road again, going for our next, our walk until we got our next story. The way these stories end always set you up for, geez, if that's how crazy this story is, I wonder what the next one will be like, and the next one after that will be like. It allowed for people to want to keep reading the stories, and to that degree, let's just say it out loud, Chaucer was a great entertainer. He figured out how to teach something, what we call a propedeutic, and that is to say, beware of authority figures, right?